Hi everyone, my name is Katie Nixon, and this is the research I conducted on the validity and reliability of estimation of repetitions to failure across the level of effort spectrum, a cross-sectional repeated measures study design protocol, with Dr. Lincoln, Dr. Rowley, and Dr. Berry in our Strength Conditioning Biomechanics Research Lab at Saginaw Valley State University. This is the abstract that I submitted for my research. The goal of this research is to assess the validity and reliability of the repetitions and reserve scale in the landmine T-bar row exercise. To our knowledge, the repetitions and reserve scale has not been assessed after each individual repetition in an exercise set yet, and the scale has not been assessed using this row exercise. Our data has the potential to help clinicians make educated decisions on the usefulness of the repetitions and reserve scale in practice, especially with this particular rowing exercise. As for our conflicts of interest prevention statements, we have our ethics approval and consent to participate. The study has been granted ethical approval by the Saginaw Valley State University Institutional Review Board. Informed consent will be obtained from all participants. Next, our disclaimer. Statements, opinions, and recommendations contained are mine unless otherwise indicated. Please use discretion in clinical reasoning when integrating the information contained in this presentation into practice. Our financial or product disclosure, none and nor are we endorsing any specific type of product. And finally, our unlabeled/unapproved uses disclosure, no relevant financial relationships exist. Additionally, any photos or videos used in this presentation are not participants. Each participant that did participate in the study was asked to fill out a consent form to allow their data to be collected and used for research. This research study is IRB approved, and for clarity's sake, this presentation is a protocol, as the data collection for the study is currently underway. Perceptual effort is a tool that is frequently used in exercise training to individualize the experience. It allows clinicians to base frequency, duration, and load of exercises based on the amount of effort the participant needs to put forth. Unfortunately, there are several different definitions of perceptual effort, which makes consistency and reliability of the practice difficult. The definition of perceptual effort that we will be using for this study is a cognitive feeling of work associated with voluntary actions. Repetitions and reserve is closely linked to perceptual effort. Using a repetitions and reserve scale, the participant will be asked to estimate how many repetitions they have until failure. This scale, much like the perceptual effort scale, is always subjective. The participant gives their estimate and the researcher or clinician simply records it. Like perceptual effort, there are many accepted scales for repetitions and reserve. However, for simplicity's sake, we will be using the scales proposed by Hackett. This scale simply asks the exerciser, how many repetitions do you have left after each repetition, and the exerciser replies with their estimate. For methods and design, our objectives are to report the validity and reliability of estimating repetitions to failure for a rowing exercise. The design of the study is a cross-sectional repeated measures study to take place in the Human Performance Lab on the campus of Saginaw Valley State University in University Center, Michigan. Our targeted population are healthy 18 to 45-year-old SVSU-affiliated individuals with a minimum resistance training background of 1 day per week for the last year. Also, they must not have any present or recent injury or surgery that prevents the participant from upper body horizontal pulling exercises, gripping heavy weight with both hands and supporting heavy weight throughout the lower body and trunk from a forward bent posture. This study consists of 3 sessions. The first session will primarily be a familiarization session, along with the initial paperwork that the participant needs to fill out. The participant will be taught how to complete the Penlay row and landmine T-bar row exercises. They will also be asked to complete the consent form. The second session will consist of testing the participant's 1 repetition maximum value, and then a set of repetitions to failure at 80% of their 1 repetition maximum. A long rest of at least 8 minutes will be given to the participant between their 1 repetition maximum testing and the set of repetitions to failure. A study completed by Fernandez found that an 8-minute rest gave enough time for the participant to fully recover from the 1 repetition maximum testing. During the set of repetitions to failure, the participant will be asked to pause after each repetition and will be asked, how many repetitions do you have left? They will then respond with their estimate and will immediately move on to the next repetition. The third session will be an exact mirror of the second session. This is the video of a visualization of what a set of repetitions to failure will look like during sessions 2 and 3 of our study. As you can see, the participant in this case is Michael. He's a member of the research team and not an actual participant. He starts in the bottom position with feet shoulder width apart, gripping the handle at either end with the bar between his legs. The bar is attached to the ground on one end, which makes this a landmine exercise row. Michael maintains hip flexion throughout the exercise and aims to keep his back straight. He then is going to transition into the top position. So he'll transition here. And you will see that his elbows should be bent at a 90-degree angle. His hips and back should remain in the same position throughout the entire exercise. To his right is actually myself. And then I'm going to continue to play this. As you can see, when Michael finishes a repetition, he pauses in the bottom position. When he does this, I ask him, how many repetitions do you have left? He replies with this estimate and then immediately proceeds on to the next repetition. He does not need to wait for my signal to proceed. This process continues until Michael reaches failure. Again, this is how the sets of repetition to failure will look like in sessions 2 and 3 in our study. Additionally, Michael is not a participant, but is actually a member of our research team. I blocked out his face for privacy's sake. Not shown is that in front of Michael, who is a participant in the previous video, was a whiteboard with this scale drawn on it. This scale was retrieved from the Hackett 2016 research. This makes it easy for the participant to remember the scale, as we cannot assume that every participant has previous knowledge of it. As you previously saw, participants will pause in the bottom position after each individual repetition and will be asked, how many repetitions do you have left? They will then respond with a value from the simple 1 to 10 chart. This is what we expect to see. We are looking to test the reliability and validity of the repetitions and reserve scale in the study. Reliability is the reproducibility of a procedure. Can we reproduce it and find similar results? In order to test reliability in the study, we are measuring the interclass correlation coefficients, ICCs, and using repeated measures ANOVA. The interclass correlation coefficients will be our primary outcome. The repeated measures ANOVA is a means to look for differences within the data we collect. Validity can be described as the extent to which the scale is accurate. To measure this, we will be using Pearson's correlations and absolute error. Pearson's correlations are simply testing for similarities within the data. It is taking a look at how similar the participant's estimated repetitions until failure is to the actual reported repetitions until failure. The higher the Pearson correlation is, the more accurate the participant's estimate is. Absolute error values will also be found for each repetition in order to break down the accuracy of the participant's estimates throughout the exercise set. In this graph, you can visualize what we expect to see from our data collection. The x-axis represents the actual reported repetitions to failure, while the y-axis represents the participants' estimated repetitions to failure. We expect to see participants' estimates become increasingly accurate as they approach failure, especially with 3 or less repetitions until failure. With 3 or more repetitions until failure, we expect to see less accurate estimates from the participants. Additionally, as the estimates become more accurate, the interclass correlation coefficient and validity values should become larger. Therefore, the smaller the x-coordinate is, the higher the ICC and validity values are. The more accurate the participant's estimate is, the higher the validity of the repetitions and reserve scale. We have assumed these values based on the previous research completed by Hackett 2016. This study assessed the repetitions and reserve scale with the goal to avoid detrimental effects of overtraining during resistance exercises. If a load is too close to failure is used, the risk of injury is heightened. Hackett found that the accuracy of estimated repetitions until failure increased as the fatigue state increased. As the participant approached failure, their estimated repetitions until failure became more accurate. It was also found that men, on average, were more accurate with their estimates than women. Resistance training background, however, seems to make no difference on the accuracy of their estimates. This information is valuable for exercise prescription and monitoring. Previous research supports the claim that exercising with loads close to failure but not reaching failure is optimal. If an individual exercises with a load that reaches failure, the risk of injury is heightened. By knowing the accuracy of the repetitions and reserve scale, clinicians may begin to utilize it when prescribing exercises to patients and clients. With this information, clinicians know the accuracy of the scale is high when close to failure, which is where optimal training occurs. What makes our research novel, however, is that to our knowledge, no one has assessed repetitions in reserve of an entire exercise set before, and it has also not been assessed with this particular T-bar rowing exercise. By this we mean, we have not been able to find any previous research assessing repetitions in reserve after each individual repetition. Our data has the potential to give clinicians more guidance with the repetitions in reserve scale, particularly in rowing exercises. The findings from our study will prove beneficial to clinicians who wish to use the repetitions in reserve scale in their training exercises to enforce individualization, to prevent injury, and to promote the best results. Our findings will help clinicians determine if the scale is a reliable tool to use when training their clients and patients. If this tool does provide to be useful, it has the capability to promote successful strength training sessions, specifically pulling exercises, such as the row. Although the repetitions and reserve scale is well developed and researched, its background in pulling exercises is lacking. This study will give clinicians further information on the reliability of the scale and the specific row exercise, helping them to make educated decisions on whether or not to use the strategy in practice. In order to maintain consistency within our study, we will use the same question and phrasing with each participant. In addition, we have stated the definitions of perceptual effort and repetitions in reserve that we will be using, as we feel these are most appropriate for our study. This data is important to clinicians, as the repetitions in reserve scale may be beneficial when prescribing exercises. For example, in the rehabilitation setting, certain populations should not exercise to failure. Physical therapists often work with patients who have multiple sclerosis, for example, and it can actually be dangerous if this particular population does reach failure during exercise. The data from our research will help clinicians determine if this is a scale they want to use in their practice or not, and if they deem it safe, reliable, and valid enough to do so. Here are the references that I used for this presentation. This slide does not show all of the references we used for our study, just the ones that I needed to support my research in this presentation. As for our declarations, the study was funded by the SVSU Undergraduate Research Program faculty-led grant. My email is also listed on the slide. Please do not hesitate to contact me with any questions or concerns. And finally, this is our lab's logo that I actually created. I would like to thank UGRP for allowing us to conduct this research and for giving me the opportunity to explore biomechanics research with my professors and classmates. Thank you all for your time.